Hey there folks, and welcome back to another one. Today I have one of the most reliable firearms of human history here in front of me, the Russian SKS. And I'm going to be asking the question, is it still worth purchasing one of these rifles in 2024? And make sure you all head down into the comment section and let me know if you think it's still worth purchasing one of these rifles in 2024. The story of the SKS begins in 1941 when Soviet weapons designer Sergei Simonov decided to start developing a semi-automatic carbine rifle for the Russians. The initial design of the SKS was referred to as the SKS 41, which was chambered in their traditional 7.62 by 54R cartridge, which, as many of you know, is also used in the SVT 40 and the Mosin Nagant. Designing of the SKS slowed down over the next couple years due to the invading Germans and World War II as a whole. That is, up until 1944, when Sergei Simonov decided to rechamber his rifle from the traditional 7.62 by 54R to the new 30 Russian short, or as we all know it by, the 7.62 by 39. It would seem that Simonov took some notes from the Germans, and ultimately his 7.62 by 39 cartridge was allegedly inspired by the 7.92 by 33 Kurtz. 7.62 by 39 fires a 30 caliber projectile at a rate of about 2,350 feet per second. The most common type of 7.62 by 39 that you will find is going to be a 122 or 123 grain full metal jacket surplus ammunition. Here in Canada, the prices vary quite a lot in 7.62 by 39 purely because we are able to import from all over the world with the exception currently of Russia. So here in Canada, we get a lot of Chinese surplus ammunition. For that, you are looking at about 1,440 rounds, and you're going to be paying only $469.99, which is a very good price. You're looking at about 32 cents per round in a 7.62 by 39, which is great. Other than that, you're going to be looking at some non-corrosive ammunition in your Norinco Red Box, which would be $290 for 500 rounds, or you would be looking at your smaller boxes of 20 in a PPU or S&B at around $25 to $30 a box. The cost of 7.62 by 39 corrosive surplus is extremely affordable. And while that's the case, I do think there are obviously apparent drawbacks as to why you would want to avoid corrosive ammunition through an SKS, mainly because you are looking at a semi-automatic gas cycling system. You're going to be transferring that corrosion all throughout this particular rifle. And a big reason why people buy these rifles is purely for the reliability factor. You can shoot thousands of non-corrosive rounds through this without ever having to clean the gun, which is awesome. But as soon as you throw corrosive ammunition into this, you're going to have to clean it every single time. And that takes away from the fact of having a super reliable gun that you never have to worry about cleaning. Will it still work if you just shoot a bunch of corrosive ammunition and don't clean it? Yeah, of course it will. But this is ultimately going to lead you to have more malfunctions in the future than a non-corrosive cartridge will. Or you could just simply clean the gun every time you fire corrosive ammunition, which a lot of people buy these guns purely for the fact that they don't want to clean these guns all the time. They just want to go out and shoot 100 rounds through them and then all of a sudden go back home, throw it in the safe, and rinse and repeat every time until they feel like they absolutely need to clean it. So that kind of takes away from the fact that the rifle is so reliable, in my opinion. The SKS is also a very practical hunting rifle. Being the fact that it fires a 30 caliber projectile at a rate of 2,350 feet per second, it is very comparable to the 30-30 Winchester, which, as many of you know, is an excellent deer hunting cartridge for out to about 200 yards. And that is the same distance that you're going to be getting out of this comfortably, is about 200 yards to efficiently and effectively take down big game. By 1945, the Soviets began producing the SKS in large quantities. Ultimately, it became the primary service rifle for many countries in the Soviet Union, but unfortunately, that was short-lived, as by 1949, one of the competitors to Simonov, Mikhail Kalashnikov, released the 8K-47, which ultimately rendered the SKS obsolete for many factors. Production of the SKS ran from 1949 to 1958 in the Tula Arsenal and 1953 to 1954 in the Izhevsk Arsenal. Over the span of those years, the Soviets were able to produce 2.7 million of these SKS rifles. Ultimately, when it stopped production in the Soviet Union, many other countries in the Soviet Union, or countries around the world that adopted the SKS, decided to start producing it themselves, which has led to today's current projection of around 15 million rifles produced in the SKS design. Aside from its production, the SKS has landed itself in over 80 militaries around the world, whether it's being for frontline service or ceremonial purposes, and it has landed itself in 30 different major conflicts in human history. Ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, hundreds of thousands of SKS rifles have been imported into North America. Primarily here in Canada, it is estimated that anywhere from 700,000 to 1 million SKS rifles were imported and are currently in circulation. Like I previously mentioned, many people have purchased these SKS rifles for the sheer reliability factor. Overall, they are probably one of, if not the most reliable semi-automatic rifles you can get on the market, especially here in Canada. I've personally put thousands of cartridges through this SKS here with very minimal cleaning, and I have never had a single hiccup. I personally, like I said, don't use corrosive ammunition. I strictly use non-corrosive ammunition, so I have put PPU and the Norinco Red Box ammunition through this gun, and it has been fantastic. I have had no hang-ups whatsoever, and everybody knows that these are very reliable, and it's never going to change. These are always going to be reliable rifles. And for anybody who's purely buying one of them just for the reliability factor, is totally right to do so. And when it comes down to cleaning one of these rifles, it is also extremely simple. The system is not complex at all. And with the amount of information and videos out there on how to disassemble and clean these rifles, it is so easy. You could probably just do it with your eyes closed, if I'm being completely honest. So cleaning wise and reliability is a big plus with this rifle. So I know that everything I'm saying is extremely appealing, and everybody's going to be like, well, you're just pointing out more factors that would encourage somebody to buy one of these rifles. Why wouldn't you go ahead and just do it? Well, obviously there are some glaring issues as of right now in the market, and the big issue is obviously the price of the SKS. If we were to go back anywhere from 5 to 10 years ago, you would be buying these SKS rifles from it anywhere from $100 to $200. You can get them for such an affordable price. But obviously today has definitely changed. There's so many factors as to why the price of these SKS has increased. But as of right now, you're looking at an average for a Russian SKS. The average cost is about $600, which is pretty absurd. To get one in full condition, you get your bayonet, you get your cleaning kit, matching serials, everything of that sort. Otherwise, you'd be looking at closer to the $500 range for some ones that might be missing parts or non-matching. And then from there, you'd also be looking at the Chinese Type 56 Carbine SKS, which is another one that's imported into Canada that you cannot, if I'm not mistaken, you cannot get it in the United States. You are going to be looking at closer to the $500 range for a full matching and $400 for one that is missing parts or non-matching. Aside from that, you can still go into your local business and order them in from a crate for a essentially pristine one that has not been used by anybody else prior to being refurbished. But for the quality of an SKS, it is far better to just buy one used. You're saving yourself $200 and you're essentially getting the same gun that you'd be getting out of a crate, and you don't have to clean it. So it's definitely better to go with a used one. And aside from that, there are many other options out there in terms of more rare designs, whether you're looking at different countries producing these SKS rifles or just a harder to get one. Simple laminate models are going for a higher value, roughly around $700. And if you were to go into a SKS like a Yugo is going for an average of over $1,000. And what I've seen last, everything was over $1,300, which is absolutely crazy. Now, I'm sure you are all asking, why has the cost of the SKS gone up so much? Well, there's several reasons as to why, and I have covered them already in my previous video on the Mosin Nagant, so I'm going to go through them again, but a little bit faster this time. Basically, one of the leading issues is obviously the economy here in Canada has been very poor. A lot of things haven't recovered, so that's one big factor. But the other big factor is that there's an ever-growing amount of PAL holders in Canada. There's about 2.3 million PAL holders in Canada, which allows you to purchase firearms. 100% of PAL holders will have a non-restricted license, which an SKS does fall under a non-restricted firearm. So with the ever-growing number of PAL holders, the demand for these rifles is getting higher and higher, being that so many people recommend them as a very reliable sport shooting option or as a simple, inexpensive hunting option. Aside from that, another big reason is the Bill C-21 that has been released by the Liberal government. Ultimately, the SKS was noted on the ban list, the prohibition list for rifles and semi-automatic rifles in particular in Canada. So that obviously immediately made everybody go crazy. Everybody was like either trying to sell their guns but trying to get the most value out of them, and everybody was buying them so they can get them before they're gone. And then obviously at the time it all kind of fell through, and up until 2025 these are still going to be in Canadian PAL holder possession, but we will have to see how it goes in 2025. But aside from that, the other big reason, again, would just be the supply and demand factor. Everybody's looking for these guns, and everybody's getting recommended these guns. And with the inevitability that they could be potentially prohibited, it's just making people spend a lot more money on them to get them sooner rather than later. The other big factor is that ever since the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, obviously Canada and the United States have both put sanctions on Russia, which prevents us from importing Russian arms and ammunition. So we are no longer able to import the Russian SKS rifles. We are still able to import the Chinese Type 56 Carbine SKSs in Canada. But in the United States, as far as I know, like I said previously, I don't believe you are able to import the Type 56 SKS because of the American import bans on China. Another big factor here in Canada is that we're able to import Chinese ammunition, which is fantastic in the sense that we're able to just continuously maintain a thorough, inexpensive price for 7.62x39, because otherwise we would have been getting like corrosive surplus from Russia, or like Russian like non-corrosive stuff from like Tula ammo or Barnaul. And unfortunately, being that we're not able to import that stuff anymore, that did dry up a little bit of the market. But being here in Canada that we're able to import Chinese ammunition, that really helps out a lot of shooters here in Canada. It keeps the cost down, and it keeps a lot of ammunition flowing into the country for these rifles, amongst other rifles that chamber the same cartridge. One of the major things I've been seeing is that a lot of people are opting to buy the Chinese Type 56 SKS over the Russian SKS. For the $100 difference, I think it is 100% worth going into a Russian SKS. Even if it's missing parts, even if it's not matching, it is better overall because you're getting a milled receiver, versus the Chinese Type 56 rifles are going to be a stamped receiver. So you're getting a far more reliable rifle that is going to be made out of a milled steel versus a stamped, usually an alloy or an aluminum alloy of some sort with very minimal steel components on a Type 56. With the uncertainty of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict right now, we are really unsure when we will be able to import these rifles again, if at all. Do I ever feel like we will see the day again where we're buying them for $100? Definitely not. I think those days are long gone. As well as the ammunition, I think once Russian ammunition comes in, there's going to be a lot of competition, so prices of ammunition are going to fluctuate quite a lot. If anybody is looking to get a Russian SKS, I would say just do it right now, get it over with. It's probably not going to get any cheaper than it is right now for the time being. But obviously, like I said, it's an uncertainty. So it could very well, change in 2 years where all of a sudden we're getting 100,000 of these into the country again, and all of a sudden the price goes from $600 down to $50. You really don't know, but unfortunately, time will tell. Another rifle that many Canadians are opting to purchase over an SKS is the Chinese Polytech Type 81. The Type 81 is one of the many rifles that has been derived from the SKS. It is essentially a AK-47 Type 56 platform body with a SKS-like short stroke gas piston on the interior. Overall, in Canada, these rifles are exceptionally well for what we're using them for. We have a very limited selection here in Canada for what type of rifles we can get. So this one in particular, the Type 81, has arguably been one of the fan favorites over the last few years, especially since 2020, for the Canadians who know what I'm talking about. But overall, there's a lot of options out there that you can get for SKSs or SKS-derived rifles. But obviously in Canada, we are quite limited with our options. Now, I do believe for the Type 81, you are getting a little bit of a nicer aftermarket support. A lot of the SKS aftermarket stuff is a little bit on the cheaper side, in my opinion. It's a lot of plastic, a lot of cheap stuff. For these Type 81s, you can get a lot of alloy or a lot of metal machined out parts that are made by a lot of private companies. So overall, it's been pretty damn good for the aftermarket side of things, and the reliability is fantastic. I've had no issues with this gun at all. No cycling issues. I'm shooting the same ammunition as my SKS, And overall, I personally like this rifle a lot better than my SKS, and it makes me feel more inclined to stick with this rifle over an SKS if I had to pick one. But it is also double the value, and including all the accessories and components that I've put on this rifle, this rifle is probably valued at around $2,500 to $3,000, I would say. Whereas you can get an SKS, like I said, for $600 and probably spend no more than an additional $400 for the aftermarket components. So now that we've covered all this information about the SKS, it is time for the final question. Is it still worth purchasing an SKS in 2024? In my opinion, the answer is yes. I think whether you're in Canada or in the United States, there is going to be a lot of different opinions on that. For us here in Canada, I think it is 100% still worth buying an SKS. If you're looking at the grand scheme of semi-automatic rifles, the SKS is still one of, if not the cheapest semi-automatics on the market for a centerfire rifle cartridge. You can get cheaper 22s, but that's not even remotely close to what this gun is. This gun is extremely reliable, and anything that's really in its price point is going to be not as good of a rifle. Some similar price semi-automatic centerfire rifles would be like a Remington 7400 or maybe like a Winchester Model 100, but those are not really designed for sport shooting. They are more hunting rifles, hunting-oriented rifles that shoot calibers that are substantially more expensive. Whereas with this SKS, you can get, like I said, cheap target ammo for 32 cents a shot. You can put aftermarket components to create a more sport shooting designed rifle. And on top of that, you can still take it out and shoot anything up to a moose with this thing, out to like 150 yards, which is pretty spectacular. For where I live here in Northern Ontario, 99% of people shooting a moose are not shooting it more than 100 yards to begin with. So you don't need to go into something crazy powerful. An SKS really at the end of the day will do. Now, obviously, there are other options out there. The Type 56 is another good option, but being that you're only spending $100 less just to get a essentially worse made rifle, I would definitely recommend going with the Russian made SKS over that. But if you're going to spend a lot more money, I would definitely say that the Type 81 Chinese rifle is definitely a better option, being that you're able to get the detachable magazines. You're getting overall better aftermarket components for the rifle. You can do all kinds of things with these rifles. The overall cosmetic appearance is nicer, in my opinion. The feel of them is nicer. They're just overall a more comfortable and very reliable rifle. They did kind of adopt a lot of features from the SKS and other rifles out there, but overall they did make a essentially better rifle. The essentially longevity of the barrel on these guys is a lot better. They do estimate that you're going to be getting probably like double what you can get out of an SKS for barrel life, which is fantastic. So overall, I've been a lot more pleased with my Type 81. But again, if you don't want to spend $1,200 on the base rifle and you want to get, you know, an SKS and then throw some attachments on it and stuff, you can do that for under $1,200 with relative ease. So I would definitely say an SKS in Canada is by far the best semi-automatic you can get for the price. But the second you go into the United States, it's a totally different ballgame, because what do you guys have there? AR-15s, AK-47s in certain states and whatnot. And overall, those are going to be a lot more affordable than a SKS would be for you guys, because from what I am basically understanding, the SKSs are worth even more in the United States. I've seen them going for like an average of like $700, which conversion rate, it's pretty damn expensive if we were to compare it to a Canadian dollar. So basically, I would definitely say it is better to get your AR-15 or your AK-47 instead of an SKS. But if you're going to be collecting surplus rifles in the United States or in Canada, I'm never going to point you in any other direction. I think for what an SKS is, if you want to shoot your collection, an SKS is by far probably like the top surplus rifle you can get. I don't think you can get much that's like cheaper. Like a Mosin's about the same price. A Carcano is very cheap, but very mid. But I will be doing a video on the Carcano too. That's another one I'm looking forward to doing for you guys. But overall, I think an SKS is an absolute yes. You can 100% feel confident that you're not going to get burnt by picking up an SKS, unless obviously the prices go back to normal in the next couple of years. But time will tell. Another big thing here in Canada is the AR-180 platform rifles that a lot of people have been buying. I do think there are a select few that are relatively good. I'm not going to say there's a single one out there that's great. You're going to get more reliability out of an SKS. That's going to beat an AR-180 platform on its own. the price of ammo is cheaper. The only thing is with an AR-180, I guess you're getting a more manageable rifle that's going to essentially be a little bit better for competition shooting. But I think with the amount of hang-ups a lot of those rifles have, you're probably going to get a little bit more enjoyment out of an SKS. So starting price point on an AR-180 platform rifle, I mean, if I can think off the top of my head, is probably like a WK-180, and you're going to be looking at like $1,400, $1,500 or something like that, which is a lot. You can buy 3 SKSs for that price. So I would probably stick again with the SKS. Alrighty folks, that is all for today's video on if you should be buying an SKS in 2024. I really hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, remember to leave a like down below and consider hitting that subscribe button to watch some similar videos here in the future. I really hope you all have a good day. Take care.